Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. Welcome to part 2, Leading with Intention with Jon Giganti. So the other topic that I really took away from reading your book, I'm going to read my favorite quote. It's my favorite quote because it's an area that I need to work on the most, and it's probably something I've struggled with my whole life and career. Schedule margin. Don't overbook yourself with meetings and calls. Doing so dumps cortisol into your bloodstream, unleashing an abundance of byproducts that negatively impact your health. Okay, I've never called it a margin, and then other people call it white space. It's just not words we use in manufacturing. So unpack that for us.
Gosh, okay. Margin to me is just this. I like how you white space. It's this empty space of it's different for everybody. But if I had to think about what the thread is there, it's probably like thinking time, quiet time, maybe doing nothing time. Right. So
doing nothing.
Yeah. So for me, like, here's what I'll give you.
Oh, that hurts just hearing you say it.
Right. So think about, as I talk to my team about this a lot, we go into COVID. What happens? Everybody goes to virtual calls. Like before COVID, we'd have conference calls. No one was on video. And all of a sudden we're on video every single day, all day. Well, people are taking advantage of that. Probably more meetings are being scheduled than need to be. But the fact that people have to, like I tell my team, go take a walking meeting. You don't have to be on video for every call. And some leaders force it. They're like, no, I want you on video. I call BS on that. I don't think... Like some meetings, sure, I get that. And maybe you at the start of it. But if you need to go take a walking break, I mean, there's research on all this. 90 minutes is about the max time someone can really have super focused work without having to get up and take a break and kind of restart their brain. Now, you can argue, I think probably certain like mornings, certain times of the day for people, you can get into a flow state and go longer than that if you're writing or doing some creative work. But I think of it like an athlete, right? So soccer game's a good example. It's a 90-minute game. So you're not sprinting the whole time either, by the way. It's like you get, like even Lionel Messi, who's blowing, like he's awesome. He's unbelievable. If you're not watch him on Miami. He's doing fantastic. He walks like 75% of the time.
Really?
And then at the moments of truth, and he's a brilliant player. He's a magician out there. He'll sprint into a certain space, have a certain pass, go somewhere, score a goal. But he's almost like a snake of sorts. Like he'll rest, and then he'll attack. And so I think it's a good metaphor for how we should approach our lives a little bit too. Like just being in attack mode 100% of the time, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. It can work for short periods of time. But if you're a manufacturing leader listening to this, I would encourage you to think about scheduling margin actually in your schedule. What I mean by that is if you have a 10-hour workday, don't work through your lunch break and don't just take lunch at your desk. Like go out for a walk or go out to eat or whatever it is and go and actually give your brain and your body and your mind and your heart and your soul a rest for a little bit. And I think too many people struggle with being quiet too. Like when's the last time you sat in a room and just sat there without picking up your phone? Me included. Like it's very or reading a book the phone's the easiest thing in the world to talk about. They're brilliant pieces of technology, but they're also so addicting. You can pop on there and find 10 different things to do and all of a sudden 2 hours goes by. So yeah, man, it's that from an intentionality perspective, scheduling margin. And I'm talking like actually don't book your day with 10 hours full of meetings. Like I think it's a cop out if you can't find an hour at least of your own time to go do something.
Well, there's a lot of people that are doing that because that is one of the struggles. It's kind of like, well, Trevor, you don't understand. I got all these meetings and I got to be here and I got to do that. And it's like, okay, but there's no physical chains, right? Like, yeah, you may have to break some of the norms. It's different with manufacturing. Like a lot of the roles, you are tied to the line, but maybe you need to tap out, right? Like maybe you even need to talk to some of your leaders. Like maybe it's a line leader that's tied to the line, but maybe they need to tap out for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Let them have a little bit of white space.
Well, don't people on the line get breaks throughout the day?
Yes. Yeah. So normally in manufacturing, if you're working an 8-hour shift, you'll get, your half hour lunch, maybe a couple 15-minute breaks in the morning and afternoon. So yeah, they get breaks. And and then what we like to do is called break relief. So that's where we run through break. And sometimes that's with relieve people. But I think sometimes, especially the higher we are in leadership, we don't need breaks.
Well, that's my point. Like, how many leaders don't take breaks?
Mm-hmm.
No, they just power through. And look, sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
Like, there are times you got to work a 15 or 20 hour day and you're traveling and you're just grinding out. There are times, but if you're not careful, you're going to burn out, man. You gotta find the time. I've learned, like, there are times, because I travel a lot. So there are times I'm on an airplane at 6 a.m. or 11 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to feel really guilty if the next day I wasn't like on my A game and working normal business hours. And I've kind of learned, like, my wife wants to go play pickleball for an hour. Like, I'm going to go do that, or I'm going to go pick up my kids from school,
awesome.
or whatever the activity is. I think it's, I don't know how this is in Canada. I guess it's similar, but in the States, I feel like there's a guilt associated with, and a pride, I should say, rather, associated with work, like working long hours. Like, the investment banking industry or the consulting industry is very prideful about, you work 100 hours a week or whatever else. Like, how effective are people really being? And it's absolutely not sustainable. And that doesn't mean you don't work hard when you're working, but this idea of oscillation is what Powerful Engagement, by the way, is a great book. I would highly recommend everybody. Jim Loehr and Tony Schwartz wrote it maybe 15 or so, maybe 20 years ago now. But they talk about this idea of thinking like an athlete at work, and oscillation is like at this every 90 minutes, I said. So you're in the game, you're between the lines, you're working, but then you're taking breaks throughout and kind of resetting everything as you go. I think it's a really important piece.
Yeah, taking a few breaks. So I spent most of my life in Canada, my first 45 years, and it's no different than the U.S., right? It's just that I remember talking to some leaders when I was first starting, and there was like some pride around the fact of, we're a lot of us at that level are salaried personnel, so you get so much vacation weeks per year, you can carry so much over, you don't get paid out for it, and it's just like, what, I don't use all mine, and there's a bit of pride to that.
There's pride, yeah.
Sure. It's kind of like, what?
Yeah.
And I remember we had in 2008, 2009, when the automotive crisis was happening, it was like, hey, we're not going to be able to pay you, but you can still come in to work, during this time period. I'm like, no, there's this is a time to actually use personally. And I did some home renovations at that time, and it was, rejuvenating.
Yeah.
Right? But that whole mind, there is an older mindset. And I think that's definitely, I think that part's really diminishing. I think the part that's not is coming back to the through line of this podcast is when I'm at work, if I'm not doing something, I have a guilt. And it's transferring that mindset of, no, actually, you need to set that time aside because that's an investment into you and the future of your team. And they actually need you to do that. There's one plant manager that I work with, and I love the fact that sometimes when he has to take a call or he has to talk to one of his teammates, he walks outside around the plant.
Okay.
And I love it. Like and even in the environment that this leader is in, there's that whole fact of like, you probably shouldn't have time during the week for yourself. And I'm like, no, like what this person's doing is modeling the mindfulness manufacturing, where it's kind of like, it's your choice. You shouldn't get fired for taking 30 minutes out a day to kind of like set back and reflect, make a few notes, maybe go for a walk, and just let that mind think, because that's where some of that creative space comes in.
Well, let me ask you this, because you said this guy or gal walks around the plant. Are they working while they're doing that?
Probably.
Yeah.
probably more like taking a call or maybe talking with someone.
And that's okay. That's better than not doing, like sitting behind a desk all day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, if you've got to grind it out for the day, just find ways to still, it's almost like working margin of sorts, right? Like I have a stand-up desk at home, one of those that rises up and down. And I usually start my day standing up, and then probably mid-morning I'll sit down for a bit, and then I'll stand up again, whatever. And that's I think a good tactical example too of just trying to find, if I'm just sitting all day, sedentary, I think is the word for it. 10 hours later, there's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah.
They're on calls all the time, and I see people in the same spot every single day. And I'm kind of neurotic a little bit. I've got people make fun of me because I'll be taking calls from my car, from a coffee shop, from a soccer field or volleyball field, if kids have practice, whatever. So I'm just, I can't really sit still for more than a couple hours anyway. It's just the way I'm wired. But I think if you can't find 30 minutes just to do nothing, look, people that are listening to this podcast right now, kudos to them. They're actually doing something that's like intellectually stimulating. And whatever podcast you listen to, great. Like you're actually, or audio. I love Audible, like the books on.
Absolutely.
Because you can go take a walk and listen to a book. That's pretty good multitasking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, and again, manufacturing is a little bit different because there's usually, the process is usually running.
Yeah.
So we're usually not sedentary, but what does happen is the connection between the people that are tied to the process to the people that are not tied to the process, the indirect labor to the direct labor.
Yeah.
And when you start to lose that connection, I'll hear the phrase, yeah, the wall. I mean, what do you mean the wall? Well, the wall between the office and the plant. There's those people and then there's us.
Sure.
And so if you don't intentionally create that connection,
yeah,
then that becomes a problem. And when we're constantly just going and sometimes getting stuck into meetings, we've got a capital request and we got to review the open action list, and then we've got to meet with a contractor, and then whether you're an engineer, whether you're in purchasing, whether you're sometimes even a supervisor, right? You get pulled into different areas. I got to try to be on the floor, but like what it comes back to that, just being that intentional of how can I schedule some time, whether that's I block it out in my calendar. I had one plant where they actually said like between 11 and 12 in the morning, no meeting.
Interesting. Yeah.
I thought, and then that was fantastic. And so that gave them some awesome space where it was whether I got to read something or I need to go out on the floor at that point in time. So make sure I can just kind of walk around, make that connection.
Yeah.
Just have some unscripted conversations like we're having right now.
Let me ask you this. Is it a challenge in manufacturing of people not wanting to walk the floor where they just kind of stay in their office and they're not connected?
Good question. Obviously it won't be the same for everyone, but I think it comes back to sometimes routines where when you're used to sitting and you're used to being in the meetings and you're used to being busy, then there just doesn't seem to be a break to kind of get out onto the floor. And I can speak from personal experience, right? Where there was always something at my desk, right? There was a manpower report. There was, some safety investigation I had to kind of go deeper into, or there's always something. So you get out of a habit, right? So that if you aren't being intentional to do that, so it doesn't become part of your regular day. So now how are you breaking that up so that you do get out onto the floor more? Yeah. Then you have the opposite where some people just feel that, hey, I get more stuff done on the floor, so I'll just go on the floor and kind of let the wind take me, right? Because somebody needs help, I kind of do this, and then all of a sudden, the day's gone. So I think it's a bit of a mixture.
Sure.
And I think that the balance becomes, how are you having that mixture of both? Because the floor is going to need us to get some new business. Right. Sure. So we need kind of that focus. And so that some of the people that are working in new business are like, man, I wish we could come on the floor more. Some people are on the line all the time, kind of like, man, we need them to kind of like focus on this a little bit more. So it's a mixture based on context.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it goes back to what's the belief or standard there too, that you want to uphold to. That's the intentionality piece, where if you're someone that believes you want to be on the floor a lot to connect with everybody, that's a great thing, I would think. So, but you also have to get the work done, the office type work too. So how do you manage both of them? But the thing that's just reading up and hearing some of your stuff that's interesting to me, you had a quote in one of your talks you gave that said, when you have a lack of connection, you have a lack of engagement. I wrote that down. That hit me pretty hard because that's, oh my gosh. So if people don't feel your authenticity, I see this all the time in business, because I used to be a selfish sales rep, that I would get the sales, but came at a cost. Like when I figured out I have to authentically serve, seems like it's a small thing, but it was a big thing. I had to really do the work to figure out, no, I'm here to serve our clients first and eventually became my team once I took over a team. But sales became somewhat easy because my clients felt it, that authenticity. And so the connected piece, the trust piece I talked about earlier too, that's why I think we're so congruent in our messages and what we're doing, because it's, this heart-based leadership really is what it comes down to. If you can really master heart-based leadership, oh my gosh, like you have the world, I think, because people will rally behind someone that they trust.
Yeah. And during COVID, I came up with our logo, and where you need to have that heart for connection, right? So, because I just know that because there was times where I was being the leader in manufacturing that I thought would get me promoted, not who I was, and that definitely set me back. Just getting stuff, getting the task done, and just kind of focused on the next one. I was, someone gave Trevor a task, they knew it was going to get done. Might be a bull in a china shop, and a few people there might be some carnage along the way, but it's going to get done. Very good at that. But I realized that, what people really needed was me, right? They just needed the true me, because I do care. I do like people, and I like those relationships. But I just wasn't taking the margins that I know that I need to take, especially after reading your book. And even today, I'm still working on it. So it's almost like something, it doesn't go away, right? Like whatever your core challenges are, they're always going to be there.
Sure.
Be mindful of them. And then just how can you set yourself to do something else so that, you do have some intentions of scheduling that time and just stepping back.
But see, that's the beauty of this whole journey of life, in my opinion. The fact that you have that self-awareness now to know this is something you have to constantly be working on. That's beautiful, because a lot of people think once they get something, they get it and it's done. That's not reality. The fact is, I wrote this book for myself as much as anybody. Like I struggle with a lot of this stuff. I was just talking to someone and I said, the older I get, I feel like the less I know. But the difference now is I'm okay with that. Where before, when I was younger, there was more of a pride around, I don't want anybody to see me sweat or think I don't know something. Now it's kind of like, I don't know, but let's figure it out. It's just, there's an epiphany or an awakening there once you get to that. So I applaud you for having that awareness.
So let's hear from your view. You and I have talked. You've got a better understanding of the mindfulness manufacturing and our audience, and this whole, you got to lead with your heart and connect with your mind and your soul, really. And and it's based on connection. So you've come up with some of your own models around heart-based leadership. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So, and that's evolving, as I shared with you earlier. So I wrote the book, and I identified this process that I've been able, fortunately, to figure out for myself, of this self-intention process, and then this others intention, where how do you build in yourself so that you can serve others. But the bigger piece that's come out of this, and I talk a little bit about it in the book, but what's underneath the surface. So I talked about it earlier: identity, values, beliefs. That work to me is the crucial work. So think about the metaphor of an iceberg. You only see above the water. It's just a small piece. Below the water, you don't see the foundation of the iceberg. A tree, you see the trunk and you see the leaves and branches, but you don't see all the roots underneath. So I think of like the head and the heart in a similar fashion. The head is kind of a lot of times our master, right? Our thoughts. And I would argue our emotions are a lot of times tied to our head, and then we take action based on that. But I think if we can get below the surface, get to know ourselves and those identities, beliefs, and values, that's heart-based. You need both. I'm not arguing you don't need the head piece, but I think it's this, once you can unlock the heart piece, oh my gosh, like there's just magic that can happen. And I've seen it. I've witnessed it in other people. I've seen it in my own ability to lead. Is just what's the Maya Angelou quote? When people know, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Like it's brilliant. That's it. Like you have to, and it's got to be authentic, and it's got to be from the heart, and that just can unlock so many things.
Yeah. That what's one of the stories that really helped you come up with that, Jon?
Stories on like what come up with the model?
Yeah, like obviously this has come through your life experiences, and we like stories on this podcast. So what's something that you want to share that kind of help our listeners connect to that message? Because I hear what you're saying, but I think I need to hear it through a story.
Yeah. So for me, I've experienced some pretty significant setbacks as well as some successes. So really probably the biggest setbacks, I was a collegiate soccer player, but got into my own head and just was the biggest head case on the field that I would struggle. I just struggled to perform at the level I knew how to perform. And it led to some dark things. I got very depressed and anxious, and for many, many years, never talked about it other than with professionals. And then when I finally started talking about it and with first people close to me, it unlocked a lot of things. And then really a lot of it's all out there. It's in the book, and I talk about it in my speech. It's amazing when you show that vulnerability and authenticity, how much it opens other people up. So that was a huge unlock for me to really realize that, all right, just because I was struggling with a lot of head stuff, there was actually a connection more to the heart. And I didn't do enough of the work on my identity and my values and what I believed. And I was just, driven by the head. And then when I was struggling on the field, I would get down on myself and pissed off. And if I had a bad touch in a game, it would lead to a second bad touch. And it just was a struggle. Now I was still able to perform at times very well too, but it was, not consistent enough. And then I got into the business world. same thing. So I was kind of the selfish sales rep, had some really successful years. I got promoted early in my career. I thought I had it all figured out. And then it came crashing down. I got kicked off an account. Someone didn't like me on an account. I almost lost another account. And I realized, like, I'm going about this the wrong way. So I did a lot of deep work to try to understand myself, to figure out how I could transform. So read a lot of books, started to hire coaches, and really started to be open to what the possibilities were. And that was the big learning of understanding the heart-head connection, which is, so important. And then I started to have panic attacks speaking. So I was a speech champion in high school, so I never had an issue speaking. And I was a sales guy. Yeah. And then all the crap I never dealt with in my head started to infiltrate my heart too. And I was I was pretty broken, probably, I don't know, 12 years ago or so. And I was given a presentation at work in Chicago, and I literally had to leave the room because my head was I would lose track of my thoughts. And it was all the crap that I built up all the years that I never dealt with. Yeah. And so that was actually a defining moment of my life. What seemed like a failure at the time was the biggest blessing I could ever have, because it really was able to get me to figure it out. And over time realized, like, okay, here's why that happened, because I wasn't dealing with that stuff, and I didn't have that heart and head connection. So I'm getting long-winded here, and I can talk for probably 2 more hours on this because I'm so passionate about it. But I think that's why it's such an important thing to really understand what your identity is, what you believe, what your values are, because then you can, like, one of my core values is I embrace adversity. And for the longest time, I didn't. I ran away from adversity. And so once I started to do the actual work of, no, this adversity happens for you, not to you. I think Tony Robbins is someone who's quoted saying that, but I love that. Like, how do you take every situation that happens in your life and use it for good? Yeah. Because everything you can use. I mean, people go through hard stuff, but you can take any of that and use it for good. So, man, that heart head piece to me, and it's something I'm still exploring. I'm not perfect at it. I'm trying to, embrace it and figure it out and see if I can help people along the way. Because I do think it's such a big unlock in manufacturing. I'm in the software industry. I know with our clients and our teams, when we're connected, when I'm connected with my team, I know they're going to do great work. Yes. When I'm not connected and they just see me as someone that's pointing at them, a boss, not a leader, for example, get the results. These are the numbers. I mean, and that's part of doing business, but you got to be very careful. That's nuanced of how do you speak truth and love? I've heard that before. Chet, I mentioned earlier, has talked about that truth, this idea of you can still call people out, for example, but you do it with a respect and a love. Yeah. And you have the relationship capital built to do it the right way. And that's when you can impact people and affect change.
Man, that is beautiful. And thank you for sharing, John. And we have that connection with Bowling Green State University of Ohio. I stayed there actually last night and got the privilege to see a lot of great hockey games there. I think I'm going to go see another one this year.
It's such a cool arena. It is. It's like, 3,000 fans or whatever. It's pretty small, but it's really fun.
Yeah, very nostalgic. My buddy Jason Clark was captain there, and we got a bunch of us Canadians got to come up for those double home games on Fridays and Saturdays, and got to experience the culture of that town.
Next time I'll meet you there, and we have to go to Trotter's and get a brown jug. It's a steak at this place called Trotter's there. That's fantastic.
All right. So it's those stories, John. I mean, as we wrap up here, it's like, we plow through it, and I think that you're on something very important that the manufacturing world needs to hear. And it's, we're plowing just like you were trying to plow through the game and then into your work. I know I've definitely felt that, right? Where I just started to, instead of like leaning into kind of who I was, I actually kind of got that label as like the bad cop guy. Right, where I could be harder on people, and it sucked, really. Yeah. I mean that's a part of my career. I look back and
I can't see you as that.
By the way, but I've got people that won't return my call. Right?
Really?
Oh yeah. Like it's just kind of like I just didn't know better. Yeah. I didn't realize the impact of my lack of connecting to my heart, the negative impact it was having on others, right? When I was just trying to drive people to get better results instead of just being curious. Yeah. And this is where it is a yes and. It's like, yes, you can have those relationships. And I've been on some teams where it gets a little bit too nice, but it's like surface nice, right? Yep. Like it's not the deeper nice. Like the deeper nice is like we're messy, right? Because if we're not, then we're not really connected, because there's a good base in all of us, and then there's the areas that we do struggle with, right? Like people were surprised when I got divorced because I had a boy and a girl and a wife and a beautiful house, and a great job, and that wasn't really who I was. I wasn't, and I just tried to so like when you said this earlier, right? When you kind of connect to yourself and your own intention, your own identity, just kind of be who you are. It's like, it's a glorious space to be, and people will rise with you.
Sure.
Right. And then you can be accountable, because you say, hey man, I know that you're doing your best, but this just doesn't feel like your best. So what's going on? How can I help? Let's have a conversation. And if you've got enough runway through those conversations and you've shared a little bit, that's one of the big misses that I had, is that just not sharing of my own struggles. Sure. And I've even learned this in this business the last 8 years, of some of the feedback I've gotten is like, hey, when you kind of shared more of your struggles, I talked about the story about my struggle with my dad. And they're like, we felt like you weren't like an executive coach from the outside. You're one of us.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
you become
really?
Human.
Yeah.
Everybody has struggles. That's what I've been most blown away with in the speaking circuit, is that I'll go give a speech now and I'll have people waiting to talk to me. I've had grown men come behind in like the green room to give me a hug after a speech.
Wow.
Thank you for saying that. And that to me that's incredible. It's a huge honor to be able to do the work. And it proves exactly what you said. I think vulnerability is a superpower. Most people don't realize that in leadership, because we're taught, especially as men, like never let them see you sweat.
Yeah.
And you connect with so many people when you actually let everybody see that you're human just like them.
Yeah.
Because everybody's going through something, right? Or know somebody that's going through something. And when you actually are transparent and authentic about that, it opens up so many connections.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be yourself, let it flow, just like this podcast. And I usually keep these around 30 minutes. And it was like, as soon as I started talking to you, it's like, oh, there's just way too much talked about with Jon, and I'll probably even have you on again. But through this with intention, and the link to your website will be in the show notes, and book report on my website, and love to share your work with our listeners. But when they think of Jon Giganti, what do you want to leave our listeners with when they go into the plan today?
Yeah, I'd say we're all living this hero's journey of sorts, and really whatever it is you're going through, whatever setbacks you have, just know that there's a way out. Know that you can come back from whatever it is. You just have to own it, trust it, and do the work on yourself. This is not easy work, by the way. This is hard work, but it's worth it. Every moment you spend getting to know yourself and figuring out how you can contribute to the world in a bigger way is really powerful work, and it's necessary work. And don't underestimate your ability to impact the world. And you don't have to impact the world. It's one person at a time, right? And that to me is intention. If you can show up, fill your own bucket, so you're ready to rock and roll and serve other people intentionally, that's where it's at.
Right on. Well, thank you for helping me with my margins, my workspace, of just taking a little more step back so I can continue my growth. And I've grown getting to know you, listening to you on stage. And thanks for sharing your message with our listeners today, Jon, and hosting us in this cool place.
Thanks, man.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.